Welcome into the Autzen Audibles Podcast here on a Wednesday morning. Erik, Skopil, Jared, Mack on this show. We're going to be talking NFL Combine. A lot of Oregon Ducks, 7 of them out there this year. Got some results back. We were going to record this on Tuesday. Unfortunately, widespread internet outages throughout Eugene kind of impeded those plans. So a day later, hopefully that's okay with everybody. And I think also good because Jared, that gave us a little more time to look at some of the fallout, some of the mock drafts, some of the discussions, see kind of where some of the industry experts saw this combine from an Oregon perspective. So let's just start, I guess, really broadly. Like, do you think this was a good combine for the 7 players? And we'll read it out. Bo Nix was there, Bucky Irving was there, Troy Franklin was there, Jackson Johnson was there, Dorlus was there, Kyrie Jackson was there, and Evan Williams. All 7 of those players took part in at least certain parts of the combine. Some did athletic testing, some didn't. But kind of broadly, good weekend for the Ducks, you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was going to be a good weekend regardless because they sent 7 guys, which is ties the program record for people sent to the scouting combine. Overall, I thought it was fine. Like guys like Bo Nix and Jackson Johnson didn't, run 40s or do a lot of athletic testing, but they don't need to. Frankly, they're going to be, high round picks, and JPJ, we'll get to him, but he's, more than likely going to be a first round pick. So he doesn't need to do those things. But for the other guys, more so like the Dorluses, the Kyrie Jacksons, and the Evan Williams of the world, like I thought all of those guys performed pretty well, and I thought boosted their draft stock. But we'll get more in depth on that later. But overall, I think it was a good one.
And we should note also that we'll be Oregon's Pro Day is a week from yesterday, the 12th of March, and that will be another opportunity for, I don't know what Bo or Jackson will do there, but they might do some athletic testing if they think they need to. Some of these guys who maybe didn't love some of their combine numbers might compete again just to see if they can improve that in front of NFL scouts. So we'll have another opportunity in just about a week here to see kind of where everybody stands. But I thought we would just kind of dive into this because hey, we're a week or so from spring football practice, which will obviously have the majority of our focus in the month of March and April. But NFL draft is big this year. This is, as we talked about, kind of hinted at on our mailbag last week. This is going to be probably the best draft class that Oregon has ever had, and there's just a lot of guys to talk about. So we're going to run right down the line here. We'll start with Bo Nix. As Jared said, didn't do the athletic testing. I will say, 6'2", 215-ish pounds, big hands, over 10 inches, which I think, I don't know, Jared, had you noticed he had the big old mitts? Because I hadn't really picked up on it being around Bo, but that I think probably wins him some points there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like if I when I shook his hand, it wasn't anything noticeable. It wasn't like shaking Nafali Dante's hand where it's like, oh boy, that's ginormous. But no, better than Troy Franklin, that's for sure.
We'll get to that in a second because that might be impactful for Troy. But Bo did throw, which he was one of the few kind of top guys to do that. Michael Penix threw. I don't think any of the top 4 guys, or I guess we're including J.J. McCarthy in that, threw. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. I know the top guys didn't, but like the top 2, that being Caleb Williams and Drake May. From what I saw, it looked like Bo was pretty good on the short intermediate stuff, had a couple nice deep balls, also had a couple of not nice deep balls, but some of that is a receiver and his timing isn't straight up, isn't maybe as good as it could be. I don't think Bo hurt his draft stock at all in Indianapolis. There have been some mocks that now have him maybe pegged a little bit lower. I think that has more to do with some of the other quarterbacks, but I think he's a borderline. He's a first or a second round pick, Jared, I think. And I think it'll most likely just come down to team needs and where everything kind of falls the quarterback situation. And if, again, 5 or 6 guys go, he'll probably be in the first round. He'll go in the first round. But I think I'm kind of kicking the tires more here. He might end up in the second. I don't know. Does that seem correct? Or what have you kind of seen on the mocks following this?
Yeah, I think the recent mocks, I did an article for Duck Territory. You can go find it. He's more like a second round pick. I don't think he like you said, I don't think he hurt his stock. I don't think he really helped it overall. Like he's a kind of not a finished product because he still, I think, has room to grow, but you know what you're getting from him. Right. You know that he's going to be a game manager. You know that he's going to understand the game really well. You know that he's going to, read defense as well and make the right decisions more often than not. But his arm strength is fine. I really don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's just that, JJ McCarthy has a better arm. Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, and Michael Penix all have better arms than he does, including Joe Milton, who can throw an orange 104 yards.
That was, by the way, one of the funnest parts of the whole thing was watching that guy just fling it like 90 yards without trying.
Yeah, I tweeted, I would pay a lot of money just to see how far he could throw a football. But Bo Nix's arm strength is what it is. It's fine. He made plenty of deep passes this year. It can play at the NFL level. It's just not awesome. It's not the best thing in the world. It's not. It's like his one kind of downfall. But he does whip it. Like, mid-range passes, he can get there. Like, he can go outside the numbers. He can go from, one side of the field to the other. Like, again, it's not bad. This is why he's probably going to be a first or a second round pick. And the thing is, like, if he moves down in mock drafts, it's kind of like recruiting rankings. Everybody gets mad because people move down. It's like, well, you know what? People move up too, which then forces other people to move down. So that's part of it as well. And then it's going to be team needs. I talked about this before, but the 5th-year option on a quarterback in the first round is huge if you really think that this is your guy. And if you don't think that he's your guy, then you don't take him in the first and you take him in the second or the third. So if a team really needs Bo Nix, maybe like, I don't know, the Broncos just released Russell Wilson. Maybe they don't take him at 12, wherever they are, and they move up, or maybe they do take him at 12, or maybe they take JJ McCarthy at 12, or maybe the Patriots at 3, they need a quarterback. Maybe they don't take Jaden Daniels and take Marvin Harrison Jr. and trade back up in the second round or the end of the first and take him because they need that 5th-year option. So there's a lot of possibilities, but in the recent mock drafts, at least in the last 72 hours, it's been more of like a second round grade, a couple first, but more of a second.
Yeah, I actually saw him going to the Patriots in one of the mocks that I told you about it before. One of the podcasts did a three round mock, which was like a 2.5 hour podcast, very lengthy. And they had Bo and Marvin Harrison Jr. at 2-year Patriots, which I'm sure you would be thrilled with if that were the outcome.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we'll go with that.
Maybe not. Okay.
I just don't want Jaden Daniels, but that's a different story for another day.
Fair enough. Okay. And I guess just kind of sticking there with Bo, I think the one thing to track here, if you're really into the NFL draft and you really want to get a feel for where he's going to go, follow NFL free agency, which precedes the draft, because the teams that sign quarterbacks are going to now be eliminated theoretically from the quarterback draft market. And that will be pretty telling to kind of where he might actually go and give us a better sense of because like you said, if the Broncos were to go out and acquire Kirk Cousins or Justin Fields, I don't know how they're going to have the ability to make another big trade for a quarterback after what just happened. But hypothetically, like the Vikings re-sign Kirk Cousins, whatever it is, that will change sort of the discussion points of who needs a quarterback and stuff. So that'll be, and it does seem like the cutoff with the first round is kind of that, I don't know, pick 13 to, I've seen a little bit of 19 with the Rams, which is kind of interesting. But anyway, it does seem like Bo's first, he's second, maybe a little bit more second round buzz. Let's move over to Bucky Irving, who I wasn't stunned by the 40 time. We ran, I think, 4.45. Like, that's about what I thought he'd run. I know folks out there expect all the Oregon skill guys to run like 4.4, and that's just not always the case. And I don't know if there was a play watching Bucky run where I was like, he is a burner. So I'm not like disappointed. I don't think he ran like a really slow time for him. But I will say I am very much backing off he could be the fourth Duck drafted. Looking around and kind of what the conversation is, it really does seem after you get through the top group of Knicks and Troy Franklin and Jackson Powers Johnson, that there's a Kyrie Jackson or Brandon Dorlus are probably more likely to be, mid to late second, early third, kind of that range. Whereas I don't know if Bucky's a top 3 round pick right now from what I saw. And part of that is the running back position just doesn't seem like there's a lot of first or second round picks, but there's a lot of depth once you get down to kind of that round 3. And he's competing with guys who just physically perform better than he did at the combine. So again, I don't think he hurt himself by running 4.55. I thought he looked good in the running back receiving drills, which I spent a little time watching. You can go up on YouTube if you want. You can find clips of all of his combine workouts. Thought he looked really good running that, as you'd expect. But he's 5'9", 192 pounds, and he's not a burner. And those are the types of attributes that probably don't make you a second or third round pick, more likely a fourth round pick, maybe. But it all just depends, again, on maybe a team loves him in the third or second and takes him. But I think it seems like he's now maybe kind of not going to be – I would say I'd be surprised now if he's the fourth duck off the board.
Yeah, I think so. And it'll always go down to team needs. But I mean, I would say of the Oregon players to go to the combine, Irving's was probably the worst performance. And again, that's kind of subjective, and other people can say that it was Nix because he just didn't run or something like that. But 4.55 for Irving, 29-inch vertical jump, like some kind of like explosive athleticism questions. But watching the tape, we watched Bucky for the last 2 seasons. He was never a breakaway speed guy, and that was fine. And he was a good pass catcher out of the backfield. He made people miss. He had a lot of wiggle. He could get you 6 to 8 yards on a carry. Again, at college level, probably wouldn't happen in the NFL, but he'll make guys miss. He'll battle. He'll fight for that extra yard. He always fell forward. Very rarely did Irving get hit behind the line and lose 2 or 3 yards. Like, I think anytime that did happen, it was rare enough to where everybody in the press box was like, wow, he lost some yards there. That was strange. But he's a running back. And I've been very vocal about my thoughts on drafting a running back. So, again, there's nobody in this class that's worth anything in the first round for a running back. I think the best performer of the running backs was Trey Benson, another Oregon product, former Oregon product, excuse me. But that's the difference. Trey Benson's like Bucky Irving size, a little bit bigger, and he's running a 4.39. Like, that can boost your stock. But I think Irving's fine. I think he'll be, a third or fourth round pick, which is great. I think he's had a wonderful career at Oregon. I think he'll be a good backup in the NFL for a couple years. Like, there are worse things in the world, that's for sure. But I thought his combine was to be expected. Like, he's not going to test well, I don't think. But dude's a gamer. You want him on your team.
And that's the part that I would come back to, and maybe just a broad conversation from, and again, we didn't go to the combine. We aren't NFL draft guys, but I think a thing that you hear a lot from these combine people or people who do go to these things is not the combine people. That's a weird way of describing them, but the real draft, experts that go and watch all this is people tend to make a little bit too much out of a 40 time and too much out of some of these other testing numbers, because you put on the film and Bucky Irving's film, and we'll get to this in a second, I think, with Troy as well, but you put on Bucky's film and his film is awesome. And his PFF grades are incredible. His tackle breaking rate, all those kind of things are really top notch. So I think teams know he's a really talented football player in a certain role. He's just clearly not going to be probably an every down back. I think he could be a really productive third down running back in the NFL as a pass catcher. He needs to work on pass protection. I think that's the one thing that really might hurt him a little bit, is he's not considered a very good pass protector, but guy has an incredible knack of finding ways to get them, maximize each and every time he touches the football. And I think that will translate to the NFL. So while he might not go as high as some people maybe thought a while ago, he's going to, I think, have an NFL career, and I think potentially a somewhat long one, although running backs, by running back standards, that might be 5 years. So
Right, exactly. I think he would be the opposite of a third down back because he can't pass block. I think he'd be like your first and second down back. Like, if you had a real platoon, like, I don't know, like back in the old days, like with the Patriots, they always had a platoon, like third down back. And Irving, I think, is your kind of your workhorse. He's a strong kid. He's short. He's agile, and he can bowl through people. So, like you said, Erik, like, I think he can have a long career in the NFL. It's just, and it doesn't matter where you get drafted. And if you can have a long career in the NFL, that's really all that matters. So, and I like him as a prospect. He's just not, he's not going to be the burner. He's not going to be a first round pick. I'm sorry. He didn't run a 4.3 or anything like that, but I still like him as a prospect.
He probably could have broken Xavier Worthy's record and still not been a first round pick, if we're being honest, just because of running back value. There's no running backs mocked to go higher than like pick 50, pick 45 in this year's draft. There's no Bijan, there's no Jahmyr Gibbs. Let's move to Troy, who I thought had a really interesting day. I mean, let's start with the hand size, which I don't know if it really matters, but we mentioned Bo having big hands. Troy's hands are like half an inch smaller than Bucky Irving, which, again, we just talked about how Bucky's like 5'9", not a very big person. Troy's 6'2", hand size under 9 inches, which again, I know a lot of people probably aren't super knowledgeable on what makes big hands or like what constitutes that. Those are not good size hands for especially a receiver. Those would be, I think, probably like the 10th percentile or lower, I would guess, in terms of hand size for a receiver. That was probably not the greatest. I was surprised he weighed in 10 pounds below his college weight too. He's 176, 6'2". Physically, probably just didn't quite leap off like I thought he might. And then he ran a really good 40, 4.41, very solid. One of the better, we're talking about this, Jared, probably one of the better 40 times by an Oregon athlete in a long time. I know Christian Gonzalez, you and I talked about this. I'd forgotten he ran sub 4.4 last year. There haven't been a lot of guys who run 4.41 or better. So credit to him for doing that. Sounds like some of the drills, again, based upon some of these podcasts I listened to, maybe he wasn't awesome. They talked about the gauntlet drill, which is something I hadn't really spent a lot of time watching, but you do watch it, and the goal is to run it on a straight line. He kind of runs, I don't know what you would call it.
He zigzags,
He zigzags. There you go, Jared. That's a better way of putting it. So some people were being critical of kind of Troy's combine. I personally am like, if he's going to go lower than where he was before it, it's probably just because Xavier Worthy ran a 4.2. It's because Adonai Mitchell at like 30 pounds heavier than Troy ran a faster 40 time. It's because Brian Thomas, also much bigger, ran a 4.33, which is stupid.
Yeah.
So
he did.
Ricky Pearsall had a great couple of days, I think, testing. So if he's to drop, I don't think it's because, kind of similar to Bo, I don't think it's because he performed poorly as much as it is some of the other receivers kind of moved up. But I have seen him more in the second round than I thought I would coming out of the combine, considering he was kind of almost consensus last 4 or 5 picks in the first going into it from what I had seen.
Yeah, for sure. He's been more of a like a second round guy in the last 72 hours, similar with Bo. But yeah, I thought his combine was fine. I was surprised he didn't run twice. Like he ran once at the 4.41 and decided to call it a day, which is a good time. Don't get me wrong. It was 10th fastest in the 2024 combine. So that's really good. Again, he's 6'2", 176 pounds. I wouldn't be surprised if he adds muscle in between now and the pro day. I'm sure he kind of slimmed down just to get some better 40 time, because that's kind of what some guys will do at this stage in the year. But I thought he was fine. The gauntlet drill I thought was stupid, like a dumb argument. Like, congrats Keon Coleman for hitting 20 miles an hour and running a straight line. You also ran, hold on, let me find it here. 4.6 140. So like, congrats. And we've seen, look, like this is the same thing as Bucky. You just go watch the tape. Like exactly. Like the combine is not where scouts and general managers and executives go and make a final decision. It's where they go and they see it. The numbers back up what they see on tape is. And Troy Franklin running a 4.41 is exactly what you see on tape. He's a burner on the outside. Keon Coleman is not that, but I love Keon Coleman. He's a great receiver, and I would take him, in the second or the third round because he's huge and he's got great hands and he outjumps people. I love him as a wide receiver prospect. But Troy Franklin, I don't care that he didn't run the gauntlet straight. I really don't, because you want to know what he doesn't do on the field? Run straight. He runs a lot of posts. He runs a lot of like screen passes. He runs vertical all the time, but not in just a straight line. He has to move and get in and out of routes and do all those good things, and which he can do. And I thought the first round buzz was interesting. I just think that there's better wide receivers in this class. I kind of feel bad for Troy, because if he was in last year's class, he probably would have been a first round pick. But like you mentioned, like you have Xavier Worthy doing his thing, Brian Thomas, Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., Roma Dunze.
Adonai Mitchell was another big mover.
Adonai Mitchell, who's tall as heck and just running really fast. Lad McConkey is working his way into to a first round like kind of grade. So that's like 6 or 7 dudes that, and I'm sure I'm missing somebody that you'll let me know in the comments, but it's just a lot of guys. And Troy is really good, but some guys just are better. Kind of happens.
Xavier Legette from South Carolina is another name I've seen kind of moving around just because he's big and athletic and ran fast. Troy as well, we should note, I thought also performed well on some of the other drills. 10-4 broad jump is really solid. 39-inch vertical was, I think, the second best amongst or third best amongst receivers. His 20-yard shuttle was also rather strong compared to the other receivers. So he didn't have a bad day, but to Jared's point, it's a really deep receivers class, and kind of just looking around at what the fallout has been, it sort of seems like the conversation is Troy didn't do anything to hurt himself as much as some other receivers did some things to really help themselves. And we'll see what happens after pro days and all of that and kind of how the conversation changes. But it does feel like both Bo and Troy kind of, not because they performed poorly, but in part because of what happened around them, maybe have seen their draft stock dip a little bit. This is also shortly after the combine, and I don't always trust everything coming out of this, just because sometimes the conversation changes wildly, and we're still a month and a half from draft, pretty close to that 5 weeks, something like that.
Like it's April 25th.
So we're still we're a ways out, and there's a lot of times for this to change. But I do think Troy now there's a pretty good chance he's not a first round pick, which would ruin our storyline of the first round wide receiver ever selected from Oregon, which is a bummer. But
it would,
who knows? Yeah. Who knows? It might someone might fall in love with him at the end of the first and think he's a great fit and take him over one of these other guys that we've talked about who kind of moved up. All right. So those are all the offensive. No, those not. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Jackson Powers Johnson. Have not gotten to him. 6'3", 328 pounds, big old hands, really broadly built. Again, didn't really do a lot of the testing. Looks like he did the bench press. 30 reps is plenty good. Did the vertical and jumped 32 inches, which is like, this is crazy how many of these guys over 300 pounds can jump like
higher than Bucky Irving.
I was going to say can like jump like more than running back. It's crazy how many of these you see. And Jackson, to me, like I wouldn't have thought he had that kind of explosiveness as a jumper necessarily, but good for him. I don't think he hurt his draft stock at all. I think he is, of the Oregon draft prospects, pretty clearly the most solidified as a first-round pick, and I have yet to see a mock draft where he's not in the first 25 or so picks. So I think not a whole lot, again, because he didn't do much of the testing. Seems like he performed well in the drills he did do, but I don't think he hurt his stock, and if anything, I think he just kind of solidified himself as somebody who will be a 15 to 25 kind of seems to be maybe the range-ish, Jared. I don't know. You probably have a better idea looking through all the mock drafts, but that was sort of the sense that I got from the ones I looked at.
Yeah, it's a weird thing with JPJ because he's a first-round talent, but he also plays center. And centers are just not as valuable as guards or tackles. And
sure.
Again, JPJ can play guard, but I think he's best suited as a center, and I think there's a lot of teams that probably believe that as well. But yeah, he's fallen in that like 16 to 25 range, 27 range. I think Lance Zierlein of NFL.com had him going 27 to the Cardinals. A lot of Miami Dolphins, a lot of Pittsburgh Steelers reuniting with Adrian Clem, and a lot of Seattle Seahawks at 18 or 20. I can't remember off the top of my head, but all those spots kind of make sense. They've all those teams either have a free agent. The Steelers' offensive line has just stunk for the last couple of years, but they've had good center tradition with the Pouncey guys. But same thing with Miami. They their center Williams. I can't remember his first name off the top of my head. He's a free agent. They signed him from a guard, moved him to center. Hasn't been a great center, so maybe they go and take one in the 21st with the 21st overall pick and give Tua some protection. So. He just looks like a pretty much a unanimous first rounder, and I think his draft stock only improved at the combine. Again, I don't know what happened in interviews, but talking to JPJ for the last 3 years, 2.5 years, he's a good kid. He's just a good interview. He's fun to be around.
Yep.
He really understands the game. I would be very shocked if there were any negative reviews from a scout, a general manager about Jackson Powers Johnson. Wonderful kid. So I think he improved his stock. He didn't do any of the drills, and maybe he does them at Oregon's pro day. I kind of doubt it because he doesn't need to. It's kind of the same as like Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison at the combine. It's like, we don't need to do anything here, bud. We're first rounders. Just tell us we're not. So I think he'll be just fine.
I'm at this point would be very surprised if he's not the first duck taken. The only other alternative being if one of those Vikings, Broncos teams kind of who are picking in the 12 to 13, whatever, 11 to 13 range, if they decide they want to take a quarterback and they like Bo, that's the only alternative. I think it's probably more likely now that Oregon has one first-round draft pick. There's obviously Bo and Troy very, very much could return to kind of being in that spot, but it sort of seems like that's the case right now from what all the buzz is. Again, we're just sort of reading the tea leaves. We're not making our own evaluations. There are far too many things involved in that to actually assess. Like, I don't know, maybe Jared, you have your own big board. I certainly don't. I watch and I have players I like, players I don't like, but I don't feel like I'm equipped enough to actually make a mock draft. But the experts that do feel that way sort of seem to have JPJ as a pretty much a lock to be a first round pick, and then the other two as borderline, but maybe more likely as second round picks, which I think it's really surprising, by the way, that JPJ is the most surefire first round pick, especially if like I were to make predictions for who I think would have been the first pick selected when the season started. He would have not even been in the conversation, because I would have thought, oh, he's not even going to be a 3-year player. He's going to come back for 2024.
Yeah, he's had an unbelievable year and a half. Like, he's just a beast. You know, he gets the starting center position like that. There was a legitimate competition, like theoretically, during spring camp and the fall camp. It's like, oh, who's going to start at center? JPJ starts every game, plays almost every snap until like Oregon puts in the subs, wins the Remington, unanimous first team All-American, is now going to be a first round draft pick. And he's got a burger named after him. So that's a pretty good 12 months, if you ask me.
Have you tried the burger? I knew he had one because he talked about it when he was on our podcast last year. I never got around to doing it. I also didn't ask him what was on the burger, which was bad interviewing on my part, because with it, I think it was one of the websites released all of the things that were on it. And it sounds, I might not be able to do anything for like 48 hours after eating that.
Yeah, burger. I'm good. It's at Elkhorn. Yeah. I like Elkhorn, but I'm not going to eat that. It sounds delicious, but like you said, like I think I'm going to be incapacitated for like a week, so I'm good.
It has like queso, macaroni and cheese, a bunch of pork. I think bacon, burgers. Obviously bacon, a burger patty. So it just sounded like the perfect thing for an offensive lineman to eat. As somebody who's getting close to not really, but kind of closing in an offensive line weight myself, I'll choose to eat other things.
Sounds like a hospital visit for me.
It really does. All right. So we did just run through all the offensive prospects. We've got a couple of more on defense here. I thought Brennan Dorlus had a pretty solid day. He measured in at 6'3", 283 pounds, long arms, like 6'8", 6'9" wingspan, which I think is very advantageous as an edge rusher. 4.85 in the 40 for a 280-pound person certainly stacks up. That's really solid. 30.5 inch vertical, 9.3 in the broad. I'm just running through the numbers there. All those numbers are good for a defensive line athlete. I do know he's still kind of considered a tweener. Teams maybe don't know if he's where exactly he's going to fit with his kind of size and everything, but I don't think he hurt himself. And in fact, I think the fact that because we talked before, and I think he was at 272 at the Senior Bowl, which was, I think, a worrisome weight. Being up at 283 and still running 4.85, which I know everybody wants everybody to run 4.5, but a person close to 300 pounds running under 5 seconds in the 40 is always just like very solid work. So I thought Dorlus did a nice job there, and I think is pretty clearly a day 2 pick, whether that be mid to late second or somewhere in the third.
Yeah, I just think his biggest issue is, what is he? Like, are we going to add, like, if I'm an NFL team, like, am I going to add 15 to 20 pounds in his frame? Am I going to cut another 10 to 15 and get him down and make him like a pure edge rusher? Like, third fastest time from a defensive end at the combine at that 4.85. The other guys were Miles Cole out of Texas Tech, who's a freak athlete, 4.67. The same with Erik Watts out of UConn, 4.67. So those are some freaks. Brandon Dorlus is no freak, but he's a hell of a player, and he's just a tweener. And it's kind of been the story around Dorlus the last 2 years at Oregon. It's like they cut him down on weight and they bulked him back up, and he's performed very well in Oregon's defense, especially it's an NFL type defense under Lupoy and Lanning. So he's done well. He showcased his ability to knock down passes this year with like 8 or 9 pass deflected out of the interior spot. So I think you can line him up wherever you want, and I think he'll do good. Like, do well, excuse me. He's a good player. You never have to worry about him getting up for games. I was having this discussion with Jared Denny of On3 the other day. He's a beast, and he's going to try to beat the crap out of you every single time that he puts his hands down in the dirt. I just don't know where he's going to play, and that's all right because that's not my job. I'm not being paid a lot of money to figure out this, and could be fired for having a terrible second or third round pick. Not my decision, but I like him more on the outside. I think like this 280, maybe 290 number in an NFL workout room, I could suit him really well. But I like him, and I think he would look best in Buffalo Bills colors. I hate to say it.
He really would. And actually, that was where I saw him mocked, and I immediately was like, that just makes a ton of sense, especially with like Von Miller's.
Great.
He would look great in the uniform. I think he would be a really good fit personnel-wise. And to that positional thing, it's like you can either see it as like, hey, he's really versatile. He's played everywhere. Or you can say, is he kind of a master of none guy who can play a bunch of different spots, but he doesn't really thrive anywhere? That's not our decision. I just think that's maybe the conversations around Brandon Dorlus, who, again, I still think is very solidly a day 2 pick coming out of the combine. And I'll be curious to see. He's one where I wonder how involved he'll be at the pro day next week. If he thinks there's some things to improve upon, possibly, or if he feels really good about the numbers he put up, because I think maybe there's just a little bit more juice in some of those, but I think he has to feel really good about what he did.
I'm going to be more interested to see what he weighs in at Oregon's pro day, because like you said, Senior Bowl is like 270, and then he comes in like 280 something at the combine, excuse me. And I don't know what he's going to weigh in at the pro day. Maybe a team told him like, hey, we want to take you in the second or third round, but you need to showcase that you can put up these numbers or these types of numbers at 292 pounds, or, we're not taking you. So maybe he shows up heavier, maybe he shows up leaner. Maybe a team had the conversation, but just the other way. It's like, hey, we want you at 271. So that's what I'm most interested in, but he's an athlete. He'll be fine.
Kyrie Jackson is 6'4", which is exciting news. Very tall for a corner. Who's listed at 6'3" at Oregon. So this is one of those few times where a guy is actually listed below his real height. Thought Kyrie had a pretty darn good couple of days. Officially 6'4", 194. Again, very long arms, which will help. 4.5 flat in the 40. It's not flashy. I also never really thought he had incredible speed. I know some people were thinking he would run faster. 4.5 won't jump off the page. An 11.1 broad jump will, which is a very, very good jump, 36.5-inch vertical. I don't know. I haven't really seen anything that suggests he hurt his stock. In fact, I think there's been more going the other way, although I know people who are hyper-focused on the 40 would say a corner running 4.5, that's not going to cut it. But how many corners are also 6'4" with his ability in press coverage? Probably not a lot.
Yeah, I mean, only, what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 corners ran under a 4.4. So it's not the best cornerback class in the world. And I think Kyrie Jackson kind of benefits from that. Also, I don't think he's going to be a corner at the NFL level. I think someone's going to move him to nickel. And because he's good enough in the downhill game, you can add another 10 to 15 pounds in his frame. He's 6'4", so that's really cool for a guy you want as a nickel. And I just don't think he has that top end speed to really compete with guys on the outside. But he did at Oregon against college guys, and when he was healthy, he was really good. Like we went over this on the last podcast. When he was healthy, he had the ability to cover any guy and basically take down one side of the field. But I don't think he's going to be asked to do that in the NFL. And that's why he was a second-round pick on Bleacher Report's mock draft, like 2 spots after Bo Nix. I was kind of shocked by that. I really like Kyrie Jackson, and I would love to move him to nickel and like the Patriots since I'm a fan. But I think any team would kind of love to do that. But it seems like people are really thinking about that idea. Again, 4.5 is just fine. He's huge. He's really long. You can add more weight to his frame. Like he's pretty ideal if you want a nickel. And if you're a corner, I don't know what they're going to do, but he's 6'4" and long. He could be anything.
And it's probably a scheme fit a little bit at which teams in terms of what type of coverages they run. Oregon didn't run an awful lot of zone. I know a lot of teams in the NFL now run more zone than man, which I don't know what that means for Kyrie. I don't really know how he fits in those type of things, idea. But that could be part of this too, of like, hey, maybe he's just a great scheme fit for Team X and they fall in love with him and take him at pick 47, or maybe there's not that and he falls to the third. Between, I guess, I'm taking Bucky out of the conversation. You can reinsert him if you want, but between, I guess, Brandon and Kyrie, who at this point do you feel like has the better likelihood of going first amongst those two?
Good question. I think
it's tough.
I don't know.
I go back and forth.
It's a tough one because I think it really depends on positional needs for a team. And both of these guys are high positional needs. Everybody needs another cornerback. Everybody needs a defensive lineman who could be disruptive. Like, these are very valuable positions. This is why you see, even in this cornerback class, it's probably not the best. Like, there's going to be one or two first round corners because every team needs a corner. And there's going to be a bunch of defensive linemen taken. Like, even though there's not a standout defensive lineman this year, there's going to be there's going to be a couple taken in the first round because, well, they're good and everybody needs a defensive lineman. So, man, I don't know. It's a good question. If I had to guess, I'd probably say Kyrie Jackson, just because you don't see a lot of 6'4" cornerbacks who can run a 4.5, while Dorlus you see a bit more of Brandon Dorlus's in the NFL world. So I guess I would take Jackson, but that's a tough one. I wouldn't be surprised if either one went higher than each other. Like, I think it just depends on the team needs at that point in the draft.
I'm with you. Yeah, no, I'd probably lean Kyrie too, just because of the post-combine buzz maybe been a little bit stronger. But yeah, I think either of those guys. I think it's going to be really fun to track this when we get to draft day too. I mean, I think day one will be maybe a little bit quieter than people expect. Day two could be 4 or 5 ducks off the board. It could be a really fun second day. So that'll be fun to check out again in April. And then the last player to take part in the combine and the player who frankly has the lowest draft stock now and will be the case all the way through is safety Evan Williams, who I thought actually measured in pretty 5'11", 200 pounds, got those 10-inch hands, which again we talked about earlier. That's not insignificant. Doesn't mean as much maybe at safety as it does at quarterback or receiver, but doesn't hurt. Ran a 4.6, which was basically that's pretty darn good for him, I thought. And then 40.5-inch vertical and a 10.6 broad jump, like pretty darn explosive in the jump. Honestly, more explosive. I would have. He had the best vertical jump of any duck at this event, and I would not have guessed that would be the case coming into this, especially with Troy taking part as well. And again, I think he's like half an inch above what Troy jumps, or an inch above what Troy jumped. But still, I don't think Evan Williams hurt himself. We talked earlier about kind of the film benefiting a player like Troy or Bucky because the film's good. Maybe some of the measurables isn't elite as some of the other players. I think for Evan, even though his athletics testing is I think probably better than people expected, I don't know if the film is going to be good enough for him to really move up the boards further than, I don't know, a 6th or 7th round pick, which is, I haven't seen anybody do I haven't seen anyone do a 7-round mock, so I really don't know exactly where people think he lands, but it's going to be more in that range.
Yeah, and that's fine. He's like a 5th-year senior, so like he's had a wonderful college career, and if he gets drafted, that's just another thing he can add to his life, to his resume, to like his memories, and that'll be great for him. Like he's going to be probably a special teamers or just a backup, a box safety. Like he's not really fast enough to be a deep safety. His tape is fine. He's not great in coverage. Like there were, people will come down and comment all the mistakes that he made this year in coverage, I'm sure. But he's a good player. He's a guy you want on your team. He's unselfish. He's more than willing to go make a play, or at least attempt to go make a play. He plays downhill. He's an explosive athlete. He's, again, not the fastest, but he was great in run help this year, just coming down from the secondary. And a lot of teams could need that on a 3rd and short, or I don't know, you're playing the Ravens, or you're playing, well, I don't know what the Tennessee Titans will look like, but a team like that where they're run heavy and it's like, all right, we're going to try to get as many guys as in the box as possible. Like Evan Williams is a good guy to have out there. He's going to give it his all, and he's going to go try to make a tackle no matter what. So he's going to be a 6th or 7th round pick, and that's fine. You're going to take that. And that, if all these guys get drafted, like we're saying they would, it would set a new Oregon record for people drafted in the NFL draft with 7. And I think that's going to happen.
I do too. Yeah, I don't think there's anything that's taken place that dissuades me from thinking that. I think if Evan had ran like a 4.8 and had a pretty mediocre testing and just not shown up well, maybe there would have been a possibility that they are stuck with tying with 6. And then, as we said before, there's also a couple of guys who didn't get combine invites, like a Casey Rogers or Popo Amavai, maybe a Stephen Jones, who could, maybe a team falls in love with them late, and Oregon ends up with 7 or 8 draft picks, or 8 or 9, who knows? But it's going to be a great draft for Oregon regardless.
Yeah, that same thing happened last year with Jordan Riley. Like, people just liked him at the pro day, and he tested pretty well. Didn't get the NFL combine invite, but the same thing could happen for Popo, Casey Rogers, Taki Taimani. Like, these are guys that are going to fill some type of need for some football team, and whether or not they get taken or they're UDFAs, we'll find out. But I think it'll surefire be 7. It could be 8, could be 9, could be 10. Who knows?
As we said earlier, Oregon's Pro Day is next Tuesday, March 12th. Myself and probably Jared, I think the two of us will most likely both be out there. If there's enough that stands out, maybe we'll do a podcast after. We'll kind of see. There's also pretty big dates coming up with the start of spring football on March 14th. That's directly after that. And as Jared said, the draft, NFL draft, is April 25th through the 27th, 3 days. Those will be fun to track. And by the way, typically the NFL draft seems to overlap with Oregon's spring game. And I think we might be in the clear for the first time in a while with that, because usually there's like a couple of guys getting taken late that we have to kind of monitor while we're watching the spring game.
Yeah, last year was very chaotic. I think like 3 or 4 guys went in the 7th round or the 6th round. And it could happen this year. We do not know.
Yeah. So anyway, we will probably be back talking draft at some point later on, but we will, I think, probably kind of divert our course and focus on the spring football, previewing that next week, maybe later this week. I'm not sure what the plan will be. And then I'm sure we will be back recapping. I guarantee we'll be back shortly after Oregon's first or second practice, depending upon which one is open to media, and recapping what they have to say about the start of the 2024 spring football for the Oregon Ducks. So for Jared Mack, this has been Erik Skopil signing off from the Autzen Audibles Podcast. Talk to you later, folks.
Peace.